He was enigmatic. He was brutal. He was loved. He was hated. He was revered for his policies. He was eventually killed for his policies. We are talking about the life and death of the world's most controversial leader of the 21st century, Muammar Gaddafi. Hello folks, today on Behind the Date, we will talk about the controversial legacy of Muammar Gaddafi, his policies, and what led to his eventual death. But before we do, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We post interesting stories from around the world every other day. Muammar Gaddafi, born in 1942, was a Libyan revolutionary and politician who served as the country's leader for 4 decades, starting from 1969. He was a controversial figure in global politics and is remembered for his long-standing autocratic rule and support for terrorism. Gaddafi was born to a poor Bedouin family, but his father ensured that he be educated no matter what. Gaddafi became the first in his family to go to middle school and eventually a military academy. In 1965, he became a member of the Free Officers, a revolutionary group, and began to campaign for a new form of government in Libya. In 1969, Gaddafi led a successful coup against Libya's King Idris and established the Libyan Arab Republic. Soon, Gaddafi declared himself the country's leader and began to implement his Third Universal Theory, a form of government that combined elements of socialism and nationalism. His rule was highly authoritarian, and he developed a cult of personality around himself. During his time in power, Gaddafi sought to create a form of government that he called the Jamahiriya, described as a combination of socialism, Arab nationalism, and Islamic values. Gaddafi's political ideology was based on strong support for pan-Arabism and the unity of the Arab world. He also held a firm belief in the principles of Arab socialism, which is an economic system that seeks to create wealth and prosperity through the collective ownership of land and resources. Under Gaddafi's rule, the country began to make significant strides in economic, social, and cultural development. He implemented a wide array of reforms that increased access to education and healthcare, improved infrastructure, and allowed Libya to become a major player in the oil industry. He also pursued several foreign policy initiatives, including economic and military cooperation with African and Arab states, as well as support for liberation movements in other countries. He was known for his opposition to Western influence in the region, which was demonstrated through his support for the Palestinian cause. He also opposed the Western-backed regimes in Egypt and Tunisia, which he saw as oppressive and undemocratic. Gaddafi also implemented several domestic policies that sought to promote education and healthcare and sought to reduce the level of poverty in the country. But despite the economic growth and better social policies, his rule was marked by many controversial policies and actions, including his support for various terrorist organizations and his brutal repression of political opposition. He was also known for his support of terrorism. He provided financial and material support to a number of militant groups, including the Irish Republican Army and various Palestinian factions. He also provided support to several radical Islamist groups, such as Al-Qaeda. This support was seen as a way for Gaddafi to exert influence over other nations and to counter Western influence in the region. His rule was characterized by a lack of respect for political and human rights. He sought to suppress any form of political opposition and was known for his use of violence and intimidation against those who opposed him. He was accused of using torture and using extrajudicial executions to suppress dissent. He was also accused of using the security forces to quell protests and of using armed forces to attack his own people. All in all, Gaddafi's political policies were largely driven by his strong belief in Arab unity and Islamic socialism. He sought to promote self-sufficiency, development, and education in the country, while also attempting to reduce the influence of the military. However, His rule was marked by human rights abuses and a lack of democracy, which ultimately frustrated many and led to his demise. Gaddafi's rule ended in 2011 when a popular revolt against his government was met with a brutal crackdown. This led to a civil war that eventually led to his overthrow and death. Gaddafi had been in power for more than 4 decades, and during his rule had become increasingly unpopular with his people. He had become increasingly oppressive and engaged in acts of arbitrary violence against his people. Gaddafi had also become increasingly isolated from the international community due to his support for terrorism and the fact that he had refused to cooperate with international organizations such as the United Nations. Gaddafi's death came as a result of a revolution in Libya that began in February 2011. The revolution was sparked by a series of protests in cities across the country that were motivated by opposition to Gaddafi's rule and the oppressive measures he had implemented. These protests quickly devolved into a full-scale civil war as rebel forces, supported by NATO airstrikes, sought to overthrow Gaddafi and his regime. In August 2011, the rebel forces, backed by NATO, finally captured the capital city of Tripoli. Gaddafi's forces had been pushed back to his hometown of Sirte, and the rebel forces made a push to take the city. In October, after a 2-month siege, rebel forces finally managed to breach the city and Gaddafi was captured. He was then killed in unclear circumstances, though it is believed that he was shot and killed by rebel forces. The death of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in 2011 marked the end of his 42-year rule and the start of a new era for the country. The death of Gaddafi brought mixed reactions from around the world.
The Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government.
While some welcomed the end of his oppressive rule, others were concerned about the future of Libya, given the political vacuum it was left in. The immediate aftermath of Gaddafi's death saw a period of chaos and instability in Libya. This was caused by a number of factors, including the lack of a unified government, the proliferation of militias, and the presence of armed groups with competing political agendas. This period of chaos led to a massive influx of refugees from neighboring countries, as well as internally displaced persons. The political instability in Libya was also reflected in its economy. The country had been heavily reliant on oil exports, which were disrupted by the conflict. This led to a sharp decline in GDP and an increase in unemployment. In addition, the ongoing conflict in Libya also led to an increase in inflation, further exacerbating the economic crisis. The death of Gaddafi also led to a resurgence of tribalism in Libya. This was due to the lack of a unified government and the proliferation of militias. As a result, tribal leaders began to take control of different parts of the country, leading to further divisions within the country. In addition, Gaddafi's death also led to increased activity by terrorist groups in the region. This was due to the lack of a unified government and the presence of armed groups with competing political agendas. This led to a number of terrorist attacks in Libya and its neighboring countries, further destabilizing the region. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. If you are fascinated by more such assassination stories, then check out our previous video on the assassination of JFK on our YouTube channel, Behind the Date.